In this video, we're going to talk about states and capabilities. Let's go ahead and jump into this. With states and capabilities, it's important to understand that our capabilities are affected by our states. And a good example of this is, let's say, a performer that has rehearsed their particular performance, every single day. They've practiced it. They've walked through all the different mental rehearsals, right? They've done everything that they need to do. However, when they are in front of the particular audience, if they're not in a resourceful state, if they're in a negative feeling type of state, no matter if they've gone through all the different mental rehearsals, all the different practice, they're not going to perform well because they're not in the right state. And so you can go through all the different practicing, the rehearsals, and you could be paralyzed and just without words and just completely fearful at that time to perform, because that state is what's really not allowing you to perform to your capabilities. And so in this scenario, this is where they need to learn how to manage their state, okay? Because again, very, very important here. Somebody can be the best at something. Somebody can be, one of the top in the world. But if they can't manage their state to perform when it's crucial, when it's necessary, then it's going to be very difficult for them to have a tremendous amount of success. Another thing to keep in mind is that there's no unresourceful people, only states, okay? So good states for learning are curiosity, fascination, interest, excitement. So just think about when you got to tackle something that is maybe going to be very difficult, and it may be, out of your comfort zone. You should take the state of curiosity and look at it from that particular point of view, because once you're curious about something, then you can really start to build up that fascination, that interest and excitement to want to know more and kind of see what's behind the scenes and see what you're going to learn. So very, very powerful there. And as I mentioned briefly, that these states are contagious. So when somebody else can get you in a particular when somebody else can get into a certain state where they are expressing, curiosity, fascination, interest, excitement, then that's going to pass on to you, right? When you're in the same vicinity. So very powerful there. Understanding states are contagious. And when you're next to somebody and they are feeling negative and they're feeling a certain way, you'll start to really notice how you start to feel the same way, unless you immediately change your state and you're able to control your state and then be able to get in the vicinity of that other individual and utilize the proper resources so that you can help them get into a more resourceful state. People obviously love to feel good about themselves, okay? People love to feel a sense of significance and importance. And when you can get them to feel a positive emotion and get them to feel good about you, right? They're going to then tie that positive emotion to you. Remember, emotions are contagious. And the most contagious type of emotion is a negative one. So you need to be aware of that. When you're around somebody who's being negative, when you're around somebody who's just, putting others down or is in this kind of blame game, helplessness type of state of mind, you want to be aware of that and either help them, essentially get into a more resourceful state, or remove yourself from the situation, because a negative state is extremely contagious and a lot more powerful, unfortunately, for getting people kind of sucked into the vortex. So very, very important there. Understand that a negative emotion is a lot more contagious than a positive one. So where do emotions come from? Do they come from within us or do they come from outside? We tend to think that emotion comes from within and then we express that into the real world, which typically happens. However, for the most part, when we think about our body as well, our body and our mind form one system. And when you can also go into your physiology and change how you feel and change your body language, change how you're standing, how you're sitting, right? And take different poses, then you're going to actually change how you actually feel. Because just stand up and raise your hands over your head like you're victorious or you're powerful, or put your hands on your hips, put your chest out, right? Do all these different things and notice how better you're going to feel. When you can change your physiology, you're going to change your emotions, how you're feeling, okay? And we all have a baseline state. So this is a baseline state where we are most comfortable with, right? And it's the most familiar. And your baseline state is essentially a combination of your habitual thoughts and feelings, okay, both physical and mental. So it's important to take notice of this. So notice how healthy you are. How comfortable do you feel in your body? How are your energy levels looking? Are they high? Are they low? Are they in between? What is your usual level of attention, awareness, and mental energy? Right? There's a really good book that I recommend by Roy Baumeister, I believe it is, and it's called Willpower. And he talks about several tests that were ran where people were actually being tested for their willpower throughout the day, and how your blood sugar and different other factors come into play with how much mental energy you have. So, becoming aware of your baseline state and understanding kind of what your normal state of mind is really going to help you with getting that anchor point of where you're currently at, and then the different things that you can do to help you increase, improve your particular state as a kind of baseline state, but then be able to also know how much you need to do to improve your state, to change your state, and to look out for negative states. So very, very powerful here. Let's talk now about association and disassociation. So when you're associated, you feel like you're right in the experience, okay? You feel the feelings that go with that experience. When you're disassociated, you have the feelings about that experience. Now, these are not just different ways of seeing a mental picture, there are ways of experiencing the world, okay? Some days you're going to feel all there. You're going to feel your energy high. You're going to be completely focused. You're going to be in your body, doing all the great things that you do. And in other days, you're going to feel more reflective, like out of touch, more like an observer that's watching life pass you by. And that's okay, but it's important to be aware of when this is happening. You're mostly associated when you're in the here and the now. You are absorbed in what you're doing. You're in the present. You don't track time. This is typically where you are in a state of flow, where you're just completely engulfed in what you're doing. Hours have passed by, maybe even days have passed by, right? You're just in this state of flow and you're getting things done, and you just don't even really realize the outside world happening, right? Going on, and you're just in the actual experience. Association is good for when you're in the moment, when you're wanting to enjoy a specific memory, right? When you're practicing a skill, when you're paying attention. Very few of us in today's day and age are able to really be in the now, in the here, right? In the present state, because there's so much stuff going on around us with technology, with social media, that it's really difficult for us to really be here in the moment. We're worrying about what's going on tomorrow, what's going to happen today, what's going to happen the next day, what's going to happen the day after the next day, and what our social media profiles are saying, what people are saying, what people are doing. And so we're like all over the place, and we're rarely ever able to just be in the moment. Just think about all the people on Instagram where they take pictures of everything that they're doing, the food that they're eating, their dogs, their cats, instead of like just living that experience and just being in that moment. They got to come in and just, take that moment and kind of ruin it, in a sense, where they got to bring out their camera. They got to, show off to other people instead of just enjoying that moment for themselves and just being fully engulfed and being fully present in that moment. And in contrast, you're disassociated when you're thinking about something rather than being in it. This is where most people tend to be. They're typically worried about the future or worried about the past, and they're thinking about all these different things that could go wrong, that can happen, instead of just, being right here, right now, and associated with the particular situation. And so these are where you're in a situation and you're just kind of watching the clock. You're just kind of thinking to yourself, gosh, how much longer is this going to be? You're not in the moment. You're not being able to really experience that moment for what it truly is. Now, disassociation is good in some context, okay? It's very, very good for reviewing experiences, right? And being able to learn from those experiences. So when you are able to look back and think about a situation that happened to you that was unfortunate, right? That was a learning situation, right? Being able to go back into your memory and look at what you did and what you did wrong, and how that in the future you're going to make that better, how you're going to be able to turn that into a positive because you've learned that experience, right? And you're able to do this from a disassociated state. So here's a quick exercise that you can do for association and disassociation. Okay, so think of a pleasant memory. Okay, think of something that you had that was a very nice experience, very nice memory. Now check to see what kind of picture you have in your mind. Are you associated, looking out through your own eyes, actually involved in the experience, or are you disassociated, seeing yourself in that situation? Now, whichever one it is, change it and try the other way. If you're associated in the picture, try changing that to where you're seeing yourself in the picture versus being in the picture, okay? Now really think about which one is your preferred here. Do you prefer the original way or do you prefer the other way? You see, for most people, being associated brings back feelings and very, very strong feelings because they're inside their body and they're so much more in touch with their feelings. Now, when you're disassociated, this is where you're out of touch with your body and you still have those feelings, but they will be more about what you see, and it's not the same type of feelings that you'll have inside your body. So disassociation is a useful technique if you want to put some distance between yourself and the memory. So run through this a couple times where you can look at a particular situation that you had that was pleasant and look at it from a disassociated versus a associated, point of view there, and notice how different you feel and the feelings that are associated with each one. Okay, very, very powerful there. So that's going to be it here for this video, and we'll see you on the next one. In this video, we're going to cover the power of anchors. Now, anchors are extremely powerful and they're all around us. They're essentially allowing us to respond to certain type of information without thinking. So we're essentially under the influence of an anchor where we can set a specific anchor for a certain behavior or certain type of action that we want to happen. And when we experience that anchor, right, then we automatically do that action and we're automatically acting in that particular way. So let's go right ahead and jump into this. So what exactly are anchors? Anchors are essentially visual, auditory, and kinesthetic triggers that become associated with a particular response or a particular state. And anchors are all around us. Just think about a national flag. Just think about, different pictures, different type of advertising. Let's say that we see a certain advertisement for a car on TV, right? That's a specific anchor that can be used for us to, want to go out and buy a new car or look at our, current car and see if we may want to upgrade. And so just think about a lot of the different things that are used in our experience in our life, right? That we have as anchors that we unknowingly are even doing, right? So think about your morning routine. Think about the different anchors that you have when you get up. Your alarm clock tells you to get up. That's an anchor. And most advertising is really trying to get you to get anchored to a great feeling or a good feeling about that product. Just think about, let's say, a beer commercial, okay? A beer commercial, it has maybe like a middle-aged man that is sitting there in his living room on his couch, maybe drinking beer by himself. And then as soon as he drinks that beer, he automatically transforms into this tropical island with a bunch of women around and a bunch of different people. And it turns into like this party type of scenario, right? The scenery of where he was initially by himself, just, drinking by himself, but then his whole environment transformed into a more enjoyable type of experience, right? And so that's what people are getting anchored into feeling, right? That positive state, that good feeling about that product. Because then every time they see that product now, right, they're going to associate that good feeling that they had watching that commercial with that product. That's a very powerful anchor there. Another powerful anchor is the weather. Now, this is where, most people are, looking outside of a window and they see a sunny day and they feel fantastic, right? They feel great. And it does make a difference between, looking outside your window and seeing a sunny day versus seeing rain and overcast, right? The weather is literally just the weather. However, people can look outside and see rain, see clouds, and interpret that into a negative type of state. And that automatically creates an anchor of feeling bad, right? Because we know that when there's sun outside, it's a sunny day, we can see it through a window, then that automatically, allows us and makes us feel good. That's that anchor, right? And then the same thing for the rain and for the clouds. That anchor is making us feel not so great. A lot of the words that we use, such as nouns, right, the person, place, or thing, are also typically anchors, because the word dog, for example, right, this is an anchor for an animal with certain qualities, right, certain characteristics. Not everyone has the exact same visual, auditory, and kinesthetic representations in response to that word. Some people, when they think about a dog, they think about their dog, right? Maybe they have a golden retriever. Maybe they have a Rottweiler. Maybe they have like a Chihuahua, right? A smaller dog. So everyone has their own kind of visual, auditory, and kinesthetic representations based on their experience with those dogs. Now, somebody else who thinks about a dog may have a negative anchor tied to that. Maybe they, when they were younger, right, they got bit by a dog, and now they have a negative anchor for anytime somebody's saying the word dog, they get into a negative state. That anchor is there. So very, very important to understand that. So some examples of kinesthetic anchors: a comfortable chair, powerful gesture, punching in the air like a victory, like heck yeah, I made this happen. So those are different examples of kinesthetic anchors. And then also some examples of the olfactory and gustatory anchors: the smell of fresh baked bread, the taste of your favorite food, the taste of chocolate, right? All of these can be anchors. A specific action, a specific word can trigger some sort of action for us to take. Now, one of the things to think about is that you can replace different anchors so that you can utilize them for more resourceful states of mind, or more resourceful states in general. Let's say that you have an anchor for smoking cigarettes. You maybe have this, process where you see maybe the, grocery store, or maybe you have the same exact routine that you use every time you get out of work and you go home, and you pass by that one store, and that one store there is an anchor for you to go in there and buy cigarettes. Well, you can essentially change that anchor so that when you go pass by that store, that anchor can be something else. That could be turned into something completely different than what initially you had that anchor there for, right? That initial anchor there is typically going to get you to want to come in and actually buy cigarettes. But when you can change that, it may give you a different view and different perspective, so that you don't have that thought of going in there and getting into cigarettes, right? That's a very, very powerful form of being able to change your anchors and also create them. So that's going to be it here for this video, and we'll see you on the next one. In this video, we're going to cover how to change your state. So being able to change your state is an extremely powerful technique, because you're going to be able to change exactly how you feel in any type of given situation, right? Any kind of experience that you're having, you can change how you're feeling. And that's extremely, extremely powerful for you to be able to influence others, to help you get into a more resourceful state, and to be able to really accomplish more of what you want, because it's really difficult for you to really do anything once you're in a negative state of mind. So being able to control your state, change your state, is extremely powerful for you to be able to learn how to do. And we're going to cover that here in this particular section. So changing states, this is the ability to choose exactly how you want to feel, right? And be able to not feel down, not feel stressed, right? And understand that it's something that you can change immediately, right? Most people tend to think that when they are sad, when they're depressed, when they're in this negative state of mind, that there is nothing that can be done to make them feel better. So what they end up doing is they go out and they get all these different pharmaceuticals, they get all these pills, right? And then they're typically just masking that feeling. And whenever that state comes back again, right, then they're just going back to the pills, instead of being able to understand how to use a technique of changing their state, right, so that they can become more resourceful whenever they're feeling down and out. So breaking states and pattern interrupt. Think about breaking a state as simply you changing the gear in a car, okay? You're in drive, or if you're in park, you're in neutral, right? Understanding that it's really that simple, okay? And a pattern interrupt is an intervention to move someone from an intense negative state to a neutral state, okay? This is like, changing your gears in reverse and going from first gear to then going to neutral. Pattern interrupts are the most powerful way for you to be able to break a state. If you're feeling down and out, you can immediately interrupt and break pattern, right? Break that pattern state of mind and get into a more resourceful state. Because once you break that state of mind, you can get into a neutral one and then get into drive where you're in control and when you're able to control that state of mind, right? And there are many ways to break state. You can easily just laugh about something. You can change your thinking. You can change your physiology. That's one of the most powerful ways, right? You want to adopt powerful poses. One of the videos that I recommend you check out is Amy Cuddy's power poses. She has a variety of different poses that if you use, you can immediately change how you feel. And also breathing. When you're in a depressed or kind of negative state of mind, your respiratory system is the first thing that typically gives, and you are typically breathing fast, breathing harder. But what you can do is control your breathing by holding your breath for a few seconds and then releasing. And once you're able to do that, you can then start to control your breathing and be more of in a calm state. And with resource anchoring, this is where you deliberately set up an anchor, okay, that did not previously exist, and you set it up so that you can get another person to get into a more resourceful state. This can be done where, let's say, you have some certain trigger that gets them to automatically think positive thoughts, positive things, great experiences, so that negative state automatically switches and changes into a more resourceful state. Very, very powerful. And with mental state elicitation, here's the thing. It's difficult for you to be able to elicit a state of another person unless you can model it for them. So what you can do in trying to change someone's states is first get into that state yourself. Let's say that you want somebody to feel happy. You want somebody to feel excited. Okay, get into that state yourself first. Okay, and remember, states are contagious. So whenever you want to move somebody from a negative state to a positive one, get into that state first and get into that vicinity of that individual and start, resembling different things that, show that you're in that positive state of mind. And then they'll start to get sucked in to that positive state of mind, and it'll completely change, right, how they're feeling. And with physical state elicitation, this is where you want to change your physiology. You want to get up. You want to, get into those power poses that are essentially going to make you feel better about yourself. You're going to give out, nonverbal communication to others, letting them know that you are okay. You are completely okay within your own skin, your own body, and you're able to really breathe more deeply and look up and smile like you are the man, you are the woman, you are the person on top of the mountain, right? And there's nothing that can get in your way of accomplishing your goals, okay? So very, very powerful there to change how your physiology is, change how you're sitting, how you're standing. If you're hunching over, change that, put your chest out, stand upright, and notice how great you feel. And with anchoring states, you can actually anchor a resourceful state visually, auditorily, or kinesthetically. A good example of this is some sort of hand gesture, okay? Or visual anchor, or a specific word that has a specific tone that you're using, can all use to get somebody into an actual anchor and change their state. So really think about different things that you can use to anchor different states for yourself, for others, to get into more resourceful states. So that's going to be it here for this video, and we'll see you on the next one. In this video, we're going to talk about states and metastates, the differences between these two and how these play a factor in us being able to change our states and how we look at our particular state. So let's go right ahead and jump into this here. So with states and metastates, here's the thing to keep in mind. We know that when we feel happy, sad, or angry, or whatever kind of emotion that we're feeling, right? Those emotions are connected to real events when we feel them inside of our body, okay? And so we can create states where we are thinking purely about that particular scenario, that emotion, okay? I mean, you can have a state that you're currently in, and then you can essentially look at it from the perspective of, okay, I'm in this state, okay, and how do I feel about being in this state? And so those are essentially what meta states are, okay? They are very, very reflective, and they allow you to respond to your own reality, your own state, and not something in the outside world. Okay, so you're able to essentially have one step removed, right, from that primary sense experience. If you're feeling a certain way, you can sit there and observe your feelings, right, and your thoughts, and be able to be like, well, man, why do I feel this way? I feel angry that I'm feeling angry. That's that meta state. And really understanding that, it really allows you to take control and look to see, okay, why am I feeling this way? Because typically what happens is you'll be in a negative state, you'll be depressed, you'll be mad, you'll be upset, and then you'll be upset and frustrated with yourself, right? Because you're in those states. So this is very, very powerful for you to be able to examine your feelings. And meta states can be useful for breaking states. So if someone is angry and you ask them, how do you feel about being angry? They might have to stop and think about it, right? And they're going to give you some reasons as to why it is that they're feeling angry, right? So now they're in a different state of mind. Because what this does is it allows them to disassociate from that experience and be able to evaluate it and become aware of their reaction to it. Okay, so very, very powerful here. Meta states disassociate from that primary state and give you that reflective type of point of view. So here is the changing states exercise. So number one, you want to become aware of your state. And then you want to change your thinking about that state. Then you want to change your physiology. And then you want to relax your muscles. Okay, so when you can essentially take this perspective here of removing yourself from the associated point of view, associated state of feeling, okay, and take that disassociated state, you can really jump into that meta state, okay, and really look at your feelings and reflect on that. Are you upset that you're feeling this way? Are you happy that you're feeling this way? Why are you feeling this way? So you become a lot more resourceful in trying to change your states and become aware of why you're feeling this way. So that's going to be it here for this video, and we'll see you on the next one. In this video, we're going to cover submodalities. Now, submodalities are essentially how we look at the world in terms of different features. Let's say we're looking at something that is large, that is small, that is a certain color, that is a certain brightness, right? Those are submodalities, and we're going to jump into those right now. When it comes to any kind of mental pictures, sounds, feelings, they all have certain qualities, okay? Your pictures, for example, may have, as I mentioned, different brightness of color. It may be, pitch black, or it may be light black, or it may be clear, it may be foggy, right? Very important to understand that they're all going to have different modalities. Your particular sounds may be loud, or they may be quiet. They may have a specific tone to them, right? And then your feelings also have a certain texture and temperature, okay? When you say the expression, I'm getting fired up, or I'm fired up, which means that you're typically either going to be upset, or you're going to be in a state of mind where you're ready to go and you're ready to get things done. So very important to understand that these particular qualities in NLP are known as submodalities. This is how we really define our pictures, our experiences, how we remember all the different experiences that we had. Now, how do you remember, or how do you know if something actually ever happened in real life? That's the magic question. Because what ends up happening is that you give real events different submodalities than those that are actually imagined. And so how do you know what you believe and what you do not believe, right? It's the same process. We give core beliefs and our, real actual experiences different submodalities than the ones that are actually imagined. And so submodalities code our experience of reality. They're the fundamental component of our experience. Now, changing submodalities is a very powerful and effective method that can be used to change the meaning of an experience. So for example, let's say that you have a experience and you want to relive it, but you want to make it so that it is smaller. It is maybe, put to the side. It is maybe looked at from a different perspective. Well, what you can do is you can imagine your movie screen in your mind, okay? And go through that experience, okay? Walk through that experience in your mind. And so what you can do is take that entire negative experience and actually shrink that movie screen down and make it super small to where it's no longer visible. And another thing that you can do is you can also change that video into black and white. You can play that backwards, right? You can reverse that. You can give that movie screen, that experience, right, that you had there, a certain type of music. Let's say you want to give it maybe clown music or some kind of funny music so that you are able to look at it from a different lens. This is an extremely powerful tool with submodalities on how you can really change the size and the scope of that particular experience. Very, very powerful. With digital submodalities, an image can be associated or disassociated. So you are either looking at yourself through your own eyes or you're actually involved in the experience. And these are extremely helpful if you want to correct a certain experience, if you want to maybe take a perceptual position where you're taking maybe the observer's perspective, and then you're also maybe taking that mediator, that third person's perspective, right, where you are disassociated and you're able to look at that situation from multiple different perspectives. So very, very powerful here as far as the digital and the analog submodalities. And specifically with the analog, this can vary on the different types of pictures. It can be where the picture's extremely dark, it can be extremely bright, and there's no real distinction between a bright picture and a dark picture. And then we have the visual submodalities. This is where you are, like I mentioned, associated or disassociated. You're looking at the situation through your own eyes or you're looking at it as yourself. And then the color. So you got either black or white, or you can give it, a certain particular tone of white or a certain tone of blue, right? Whatever that may be. And then also distance, near, far, depth. Is it 2 or 3 dimensional? Location, left or right, up or down. These are going to help you get a lot more clear on those experiences that you're actually, remembering, or that you have in the back of your mind that may have been a negative experience, but maybe you're just not gathering and remembering all of the information, right? The actual experience, how it really went down. Maybe you're just looking at it from the perspective of, this person said this to me and hurt my feelings. And now you've generalized and you've deleted all the other information. But when you can make it crystal clear, right, as to, what exactly happened, giving yourself the ability to implement the submodalities in there, then you'll be able to see things in a whole new light. Then we have auditory submodalities, and these can be verbal or nonverbal, right? Words, sounds, you got volume. This is going to be loud or soft. It's going to be soft or harsh when it comes to tone. With the kinesthetic submodalities, this is going to be about location, okay, where in the body specifically, pressure, is it going to be hard? Is it soft? Texture, is it rough or is it smooth? Weight, is it light? Is it heavy? And then temperature. Is it going to be hot? Is it going to be cold? Is it warm? And then finally, we have the olfactory and gustatory submodalities. This is all about tastes and smells, connecting directly with the parts of our brain, right, that are governing the emotion. So understand that when you can change that very quickly as far as a specific smell that you can remember, maybe regarding your favorite dish, or something that may trigger an emotion, a specific emotion, or a certain feeling about that particular experience. Now, there are certain critical submodalities that you have to be aware of, and these are the ones that make the biggest difference here. And a good example of this is the brightness and the size of an image. This is critical for most people. So making the mental pictures either bigger or brighter greatly increases the impact of how you feel about that experience. Just think about a negative experience that you have had in the past, okay? Play that scene in your mind and then make that picture smaller and make it black and white. And then realize how you feel differently about that particular experience and how it's not even really an issue anymore, right? And where you can take a positive experience that maybe is being played in a regular size screen, right? Normal size screen in your mind, and then expand that image and look at and really feel how that really changes your emotion or the feelings that you're actually experiencing and how great that makes you feel. When you can expand a movie that you're creating in your mind of you having a positive experience, and you can make it larger, you can add, very specific color tones to it, you can add sounds, you can add all these different submodalities, then that's going to make the world a difference for that experience. One of the things to keep in mind is with the language that we use, we're often using a lot of different submodalities. And not only that, we're using a specific sense. So any kind of predicate phrases, any kind of metaphors are giving you the ability to look at what people are actually looking at. Predicate phrases and metaphors not only give you the representational system that that person is using, but also gives you an idea, right? Or really tells you straight up what submodalities are involved. For example, if somebody is telling you, hey, I take a dim view of this or of that, or this is not crystal clear for me, right? When somebody is talking about those types of things, right, then they're using a visual system and they're talking about the specific brightness. So that's the submodality. They have the visual system and then they're talking about it being not too bright for them. So what you can do for them is help them realize that brightness that has always been there, because maybe they need to expand that and change that brightness to where they can fully see that. Or maybe it's dark right now and they need some illumination, right? Another example is when somebody's talking about getting a strong grip, or even when somebody's saying, hey, I need to take a hard look at this, or being able to tackle this problem or this situation, right? They're thinking kinesthetically with the submodality of pressure. Okay, so language is a direct window into the thought process of an individual. To pace a person's thinking process, you not only want to use the same representational system, but also the same submodality distinctions. So, for example, the details are rather hazy to me. What do you need to know to make them clear, right? They're obviously using the visual representational system here. You got to keep up the pressure. How would you suggest I strongly take charge here? Notice how you're using the right submodality, the right visual representational system to help them get clarity, essentially, right, on what their problem is or what they're having an issue with. And then you have something tells me it's not quite right. What do I need to know, or what do you need to know for it to sound right? So very, very powerful here to really understand what submodality people are using and then what representational system they're also using with that particular submodality. And it's very interesting that some people, when they have problems or issues, they'll talk about having blocks or obstacles. Others say that they're stuck. People will talk about being overwhelmed or, drowning in problems. So when you think about those types of statements, you can use the same type of representational system with the matching submodality to help them think through that problem, to help them get over whatever they're experiencing that is getting in their way, so that they can actually move forward and actually take action. Because that is how they're experiencing their problem, through their map of the world. And so that's going to be it here for submodalities, but I really want you to get a really tight grip on this and really understand the power of submodalities, how you can make something smaller, make something larger, how you can listen to what people are saying and what type of submodalities they're using, so you can repeat those types of words back to them to help them get clarity, but also build rapport, right? Because when people can hear and listen to what you're saying and how it's similar to what they're saying, and the same type of submodality and the same type of representational system, then you're going to build a ton of rapport and be able to help those people out. So that's going to be it here for this video, and we'll see you on the next one. In this video, we're going to walk through a special technique here that is called the swish technique. This is an extremely powerful technique that will allow you to change unwanted behavior. A good example of this is a behavior that I was able to change by being able to no longer bite my nails. I was biting my nails for 10 plus years. And I remember, always just sitting there whenever I was anxious or whenever I was nervous or some kind of, feeling where I was just unsure. I would just automatically be biting my nails, and then I would find myself in the middle of doing that and be like, man, why am I doing this? I need to stop doing this. And I was able to utilize this technique to essentially stop this, right? And be able to actually start clipping my nails with the nail clipper instead of biting them. So, tremendously useful technique here. I'm going to walk you through exactly how to go about this. Let's go right ahead and jump in here. So as I mentioned, the swish technique is a really great technique for changing unwanted behavior, any kind of habits, by essentially establishing new ones, okay? And so what was previously used to trigger that old behavior will then trigger a new behavior in a new direction. Just like I mentioned with my example, how I was able to overcome biting my nails, right? Stop biting my nails. I switched that behavior into a more resourceful one. And this is a lot more powerful than actually just trying to change that behavior. Yes, you can change that behavior, right? Create a new habit, but it typically takes 67 days or so. But with this particular technique, you can do this in a lot more short period of time. So the very first thing that you want to do is you want to identify the problem. This is the particular behavior that you want to change. Maybe you want to, stop going to bed so late. Maybe you want to, stop, maybe biting your nails as well, or some kind of behavior that you just want to change, or maybe even a specific situation. Okay. And then you want to identify the picture or the pictures that trigger that particular problem. How do you know when to do it? What specifically are you thinking about? Or what kind of specific visual triggers are there that you have for the particular problem to actually, happen? You want to look for specific visual triggers for the actual problem. This may be some sort of internal trigger like mine, where anytime I felt nervous, anxious, or maybe a little bit worried, I would automatically revert to doing that, and then I would sit there in the middle of it, and then I would catch myself and I would be frustrated at why I was doing it. So think about whatever trigger that you feel is external and then also internal that actually triggers that particular event or experience or behavior. And then identify two critical submodalities of the picture that give it its impact. This is crucial here. You want to look at whether it's small, whether it's large, is it bright, is it colored? Does it have a specific range as far as pitch? Is it left? Is it right? Right? Very important here to identify two critical submodalities for that particular picture. And after you do that, you want to break state. You want to think about what you're going to have for breakfast, or just something that completely removes you from that state of mind, okay? And then you want to create a picture of a desired self-image. So how would you see yourself if you didn't have this problem? What sort of person would be easily able to solve this problem, or would not even have this problem in the first place? Create that image as clear and as vividly as possible for you to actually see and imagine of how that desired self-image looks like for you. Very important here. You want to make it a disassociated picture, okay? And then you want to break state once again. So think about something that is completely not related to what you're currently doing, right, with this exercise. Think about what you're going to have for dinner, what you're going to do tomorrow, right, something unrelated. Then you want to put the pictures in the same frame. So go back to the problem picture, okay? This is where you had your negative experience, or, you're doing that, negative behavior. For me, it's biting my nails, right? And depending on the submodalities, you're most likely going to want to make it smaller as far as the picture, and you may want to also brighten it up, or you may want to, add black and white to it, depending on what you're looking to accomplish, right? And it's very critical here that you make this an associated image. And in the corner of this picture, put your desired self-image in the opposite submodalities as a small, dark, disassociated picture. Now, what you want to do is you want to switch these two pictures very quickly, okay? Make the very small, dark image big and bright, and then expand to fill the entire frame. Make the problem picture grow dim and shrink to nothing. Do this very fast and do this multiple times, okay? You want to do this like it's making that swish sound. That's why it's called the swish pattern, right? Back and forth, extremely fast, okay? Then you want to break state visually, okay? Just think about something completely unrelated. Think about something that maybe you're going to do tomorrow, or you have to do the next day, whatever that may be, okay? And then you want to rinse and repeat. You want to do this at least 3 times, and you want to do this very fast. When you're switching those two pictures out, you need to do that as quickly as possible, okay? And you want to make sure that you're breaking state at each individual section, okay? Because if not, then you're going to risk bringing the problem back, okay? One key thing I want you to keep in mind and understand is that where attention goes, energy flows. And so when you can break state, your attention is no longer on that problem, on that situation. It's thinking about something else. And then when you get back into the actual technique, your energy and your attention is back on that thing, right? So very, very important there to remember to break state and completely think about something unrelated. So very, very powerful technique here. I recommend you try this and you do this several times so that you can remove any kind of unwanted behavior. Depending on the severity of it, you may need to do this several times, but it's really, really powerful. It's helped me out, and I know it'll tremendously help you out as well. So that's going to be it here for this video, and we'll see you on the next one. In this video, we're going to go over the learning from experience exercise or technique. This is an extremely powerful technique as well. It's going to help you understand your maybe past experience and be able to really learn from that mistake or learn from that negative experience so you can't make that same mistake in the future. So very, very powerful technique here. Let's go right ahead and jump into this. So as I mentioned, this is a really powerful technique here to help you go through and experience a painful experience again, right? But then be able to really learn from that mistake so you don't have to make that mistake again. And this works for any type of negative experience, okay? So step one, close your eyes and think back to an unpleasant experience in your life, okay? I want you to get as clear as possible and think about all the different submodalities that you can implement into this particular experience. As far as tone, color, is it small? Is it big? Is it in front of you? Are you associated? Are you disassociated? Now with step two, imagine yourself doing that now in your imagination. Stay disassociated. So watch yourself acting in that situation on your mental screen. Relive the incidents in your imagination. But now see yourself doing something completely different and see how that situation resolves itself in a better way. If you're satisfied with that situation now, then imagine stepping into that situation and reliving it through that new experience in a new associated way. Be back in that particular experience, seeing it through your own eyes and acting the way you should have acted to get that desired result. Then make your movie screen go blank, okay? And do this at least 10 times, reliving that exact same experience, that event, the way that it should have happened, that you would have preferred it to happen. And then blacking out your mental screen at the end of each replay. And take what you've learned from this incident to help you in the future. Leave that pain of that particular experience in the past. And treat other experiences that you've had like this or any kind of negative experience just like this particular situation where you can relive it and you can actually put in an experience or an event the way that it should have turned out to your best interest. And one of the key important things here is to remember both the incidents, the old one that happened, that actually happened to you, that you remember, that you recall, and then the new one that you created with the positive outcome as two separate incidents. Very important here, okay? Because right now, or maybe for the most part, you have it remembered as one incident. But when you can create this and you can remember it as two separate incidents, it'll make the world a difference for you. Now with that new positive memory that you've created, you really want to enjoy that. Notice how what you did contributed to your success. The specific actions that you took in this new type of experience that you created in your mind, right? What exactly did you do that made it a success? How many different situations can you think of that are just like this one here? How can you learn from those as well to make them different or better in the future? Is there a situation that's coming up in your life right now that can also benefit from this particular learning experience? So the strategy here is really to go and to look at your whole experience that you had and replay it in your mind, but then replay it with you actually becoming victorious and successful so that you can take the observer point of view and look at, what could I have done that would have made the difference here? Could I have maybe changed the way I was talking to that person? Maybe change how I was maybe treating them, how I was coming across, right? All these different things that you could look at changing that would have garnered a more positive outcome, right? Or maybe positive type of response from that other person or from that particular event. So extremely powerful tool here, because any single thing that happens to us, everything that happens to us in our life is neither good or bad. It's either useful or it's not. And it's really about the meaning that we attach to it. That's really what it comes down to, right? If something happened to us that we attach a negative connotation to or negative meaning to, we can go in and recreate that event and change that whole experience where it's actually a positive one, and then we can learn from that and learn to not make the same mistakes. This is extremely powerful because you're going to create this whole entire experience in your mind and not have to go out in the real world and do it again, right? Because most people will just keep making the same mistake over and over again, and they won't ever learn. But when you can walk through that in your mind and look for resources and different ways to make that, experience or that situation better for the future, then that is extremely powerful for you to be able to no longer make those mistakes and learn from your experience. So that's going to be it here for this video, and we'll see you on the next one. In this video, we're going to go over timelines. We're going to cover time. We're going to cover whether or not time actually exists. I'm very excited to jump into this one here. And so let's go right ahead and get started. So time. What exactly is time? Is time actually something that us humans created? Is it, actually a reality where, because we have a clock, right? Because we have actually time that we use to make sure that we're not late, that we're on time, that, we know, hey, it's, this o'clock, it's this time, it's time for us to do X, to do Y, right? Is that really what time is? Is it, an illusion? Well, here's the thing. Quantum mechanics, right? Quantum theory says that everything that has ever been or will be is already here, okay? Now let that sink in for a moment, okay? Everything that has already been or will be is already here. And so essentially what it is it's electromagnetic frequencies on a specific electromagnetic spectrum, okay? And that data comes in through our 5 senses. It's processed through our cortexes. It creates our representational systems, right? VAKOG. And then the distinctions between those create everything else, okay? So time as we understand it does not exist except as a filter. It's essentially a way that your neurology organizes experiences and recordings of experience, okay, so that we know what happened when in relation to other things. So it's more of a filter to let us know that this happened in relation to this over here, and then this happened in relation to this over there, okay? So it's really just a filter. So we may not know exactly what time is because, as I mentioned, it's really just a filter, okay, that we're using to let us know, the relationship between one thing and another. However, we do know how to measure it. And so what I want you to do is imagine a line from left to right. Now, imagine walking that line, okay? There's 2 different distinctions here. There's in time and through time. There are 2 ways that we typically relate to our particular timelines, okay? Somebody who is typically in time is typically in the here and now. Somebody who is through time is always kind of thinking about the future. They're planning, they have their calendar, they're planning, schedule, everything all set up. And some people can get very, very kind of OCD, right? As far as their planning and, planning every single detail and all this stuff. And so really just think about in time being associated and through time being disassociated. And so with that line that we talked about, for you to imagine, think about the line that's either going through your body, okay? And people with an in-time timeline are associated with the timeline actually going through their body, and they're in the now, okay? So this is very simple to think about. You often have the past behind them and then the future right in front of them, okay? Very, very easy to look at as far as your timeline. Now, a through timeline is outside your body. This is where you're often to the side and you're looking at the future, okay? And you're typically disassociated. And the key here is you typically have one preference over the other, but you want to be able to utilize both. You want to be in the here and the now and actually be working and experiencing and being in that state of flow. And then you want to be also in the through time, because you want to be able to plan for the future, plan your goals, strategize, right? Set up an outcome and be able to reverse engineer the steps to help you get there. So using timelines is a very powerful way to help you access different resources. So as I mentioned, being able to create that compelling future, that great outcome that you want to happen in your life, whether it be a specific goal, or maybe you want to move to a new location, get a different job, right? Whatever that may be, that can help you create that new compelling future. And with time management, somebody who has a timeline that is in time is good for enjoying the moment. I mentioned that being able to be here, present, and experience the here and now, because really that's all there is, right? We talked about quantum theory, quantum mechanics, and that is telling us that everything that's ever been, everything that has ever been or will be is already here. And so really, the only thing that is actually real is the here and now, is this present moment. And so being able to be in that present moment, being able to enjoy it, will make a significant impact in your life. For myself, this is something that I've had to really learn to develop. I'm the kind of person that always likes to look at down the future and look at, creating these, really nice, compelling futures. But oftentimes I forget to be present and forget to be fully associated and in the moment in what I'm doing. And those that have their past behind them may find it difficult to access resources from past experiences by being able to kind of bring out and remember your past wins. And then vice versa. Anybody who has a past timeline that is immediately in front of them will find it hard to escape from past memories. They're literally going to block their view of the future. And you can find out a lot about how people think in regards to their timeline with very specific submodalities that they're using. So let's say somebody is saying, he has a bright future. I'm looking forward to the, holiday. I'm looking forward to the vacation. I'm looking forward to spending time with, this person, that person, or time is running out, or time is on my side, right? So time is so important that we use it to organize all of our language. Because think about somebody who's using, I got plenty of time, or, there's no time to waste. Those are two different types of timelines. Somebody who says, I have plenty of time, is typically in the here and now, right? They're completely focused. They're completely associated. Somebody who says, I don't have enough time, or time is running out, then they are essentially not in the here and now, and they're looking at the future and focus on, what needs to get done in order to get to that particular future. And so looking at the examples up there of the in time and through time, really look through these and look to see which one that you are most similar to. Are you somebody who is in time, tends to be in the moment, tends to, you want to just, go with the spur of the moment and, go with the flow, not necessarily plan things out? Or are you somebody who likes to plan ahead, likes to know exactly what you're going to be doing, all the different things involved every single step of the way? Because this is really going to help you understand what is your preference and how you can actually implement one or the other into what you're currently doing. Because if you're always in time, you're always just kind of going with the flow, you're never really planning, then you're just going to let life kind of take you, along the way, right? And you're not really going to be in control of the direction that you're going. Versus if you're through time, right, you're going to be able to plan things ahead a lot more readily. You're going to be more in control of your future, of your life, and be able to create that life that you've always wanted. So very important there to be aware of where you currently are at and be able to implement a little bit of each side so that you can be relatively balanced. So that's going to be it here for this video, and we'll see you on the next one. In this video, we're going to talk about strategies and how to understand the different types of strategies that we use to essentially do all the different things that we do in our everyday lives, right? Because we have different strategies that we use to make decisions, that we use to remember things. So once we're able to understand a specific strategy that we're using to actually understand a process of how we recall information, how we are making a decision to actually take action, that's going to make the world a difference for us. So let's go right ahead and jump into this. Now with NLP strategies, these are not your typical kind of long-term kind of business strategies that are used. In NLP, these strategies are used to really understand how we go about achieving our outcomes. Essentially, the way that a strategy is looked at here in NLP is through a sequence of representations that lead to an outcome. Okay, so different steps that we take to make a decision, different steps that we use to recall information, things like that that we really look at and really understand and decide, okay, you know what? Let's make this decision. Let's recall this information. And this is all done at an unconscious level. And so NLP, right, as a whole, consists of three basic elements at the very kind of macro perspective here, okay? Internal representations, external behavior, and internal states. Those are the three essential kind of top layer, 100,000 foot view factors, right, for NLP. And with strategies, these belong to the internal representation segment, okay? They combine representational systems with outcomes. Strategies are those sequences of thought that we use to achieve our outcomes. And again, this is really done mostly at an unconscious level. Strategies have three key ingredients. Number one, you have an outcome. Then you have a sequence of representational systems. Then the submodalities of those representational systems. So think about it this way, okay? Let's say that you want to, get in better shape. You want to be 25 pounds lighter, or you want to weigh, let's say, a certain weight. Let's say 200 pounds, okay? You're then going to use a sequence of representational systems to look through and see that mental picture in your mind, right? And typically see it visually, because you get to see yourself at a disassociated perspective, right? Where you're able to see yourself at that weight, okay? And then you have submodalities of those representational systems. So in that picture that you see yourself in, right? At that desired weight, what are you wearing? What are you hearing? What are you smelling? What are you seeing, right? Is it something where, the picture is large? Is it bright? Does it have a specific color to it? Is it black and white? Is it directly in front of you? Is it to the side, right? Very, very important there to understand these submodality distinctions. And the way to think about a strategy is to simply think about a recipe, okay, for baking a cake or baking some kind of, dish, right? You have basic ingredients, right, which is the representational systems. And then you have the quality and the quantity of those ingredients, right? These submodalities, whether that is, large, small, any kind of specific tone to it, whether it has a specific rhythm to it, and you use those to get to the end result, right? That particular outcome. And so there are five main categories of strategy. There's decision strategies. This is how exactly we decide any kind of course of action to take from a number of different choices, right? If we're, deciding whether we should do X or Y, we have a specific strategy for doing that, right? For choosing that particular decision. Same thing with motivation, right? How we motivate ourselves to act. Does it come internally? Does it come from external sources, right? And then we have reality strategies, how we decide what is real and what to believe. A lot of people out there will say, well, I got to see it to believe it. And others like myself already believe it and then see it in our minds, and then we actually manifest that in the real world, right? In actual reality. But most people have to see something in order for them to believe it. They can't sit there and actually think about a specific outcome or something that they're looking to accomplish. They don't believe in themselves because they have limiting beliefs, right? About that particular area. Whether it be around money, whether it be around relationships, they have to see something first in reality before they can believe it, versus myself and others can really believe something wholeheartedly with all of our being, and then see it in our mind's eye, and then be able to manifest that in reality. Then we have learning strategies, how we learn new material. There are certain ways that we take in information that we consume and that we're able to take in new knowledge, new information. Then we have memory strategies, right? How we go about remembering a specific experience, how we go back in our mind and think about, when we were 10 years old, we went through this experience, we had this happen, right? All of that is a specific process, right? A specific strategy that we're using. And so what you'll find is that strategies really help explain the differences between people. One person may have a really great strategy for remembering things, right? As far as their memory bank. And that's because they're using a better memory strategy. And other people can have a very good decision-making strategy, right? And so with NLP, you can model the decision-making strategies of those great leaders. So here's the thing. Think about people that are very analytical, that are like engineers, okay? If it were up to them, as far as getting a product out there into the marketplace, it would never come off the assembly line because there's always something to fix. There's always something to add, right? And so that's their decision-making strategy that they're using. However, they can learn to use a different decision-making strategy so they can be not as analytical in the context of making decisions, where they can actually put out action into the real world, right? And then be able to collect data and feedback, because most people that are actually, taking in information and being analytical and wanting to get everything perfect and all these different permutations find it very difficult to take action, right? Versus somebody who's an entrepreneur like myself, who understands the true value of making quick decisions and trusting your gut, right? That is my decision-making strategies. Whenever I look at a situation and I'm, left with a decision that I need to make, I'm always trusting my gut, my intuition, and making quick decisions. And that's my decision-making strategy. Other people don't tend to use that. They tend to look at things more analytical. It's because they don't have a very good decision-making strategy. However, they can learn this. And this is what's really crucial here. People that are using different strategies to recall information, to learn different things, can all be taught. And everybody can learn all these different strategies so we can become more resourceful and better versions of ourselves. And so that's going to be it here for this video, and we'll see you on the next one. In this video, we're going to cover using NLP strategies. So let's go right ahead and jump into this. So in the previous lecture, we went over strategies and understanding that we all use different strategies to recall information, to make decisions, to get motivation. So when you can understand the strategy that you're using and how it's really inefficient or ineffective, then you can change that strategy and you can have a better response to that particular situation. If you're wanting to be better at making decisions, you can choose to have a different decision-making strategy. So strategies are used in modeling. So modeling involves discovering the mental strategy that a person is using. This is fantastic for when you want to model a idol of yours or someone that you look up to. Maybe it's a business person that you're following that you are trying to model their behavior after, right? Because they may be very successful and where you want to be. So it's really about modeling their behavior strategies to help you become more like them. And also with changing beliefs. So we all have a belief strategy that we use to decide on what we believe. And a lot of this has to do with our experiences, our background, but there's a specific process and strategy that we use to decide what exactly we believe and what we don't believe. Same thing goes for learning. You can elicit and install strategies for learning specific subjects and concepts. Again, this is all something here where everything that we do is a strategy and a process in our mind. And when we can change that to a more useful strategy, then that's how we're going to be able to become more proficient in that area. All customers have a buying strategy, how they decide what and when they buy. So this all goes through asking questions, goes through, finding out more about that individual. And with my background being in sales and marketing, this is something that I need to be able to pay attention to all the time, right? How customers are looking to buy, what strategy they're using. And a lot of times it comes down to that specific individual. Are they somebody who needs a lot of information? Or are they somebody that needs, just the big picture? Like, what is it going to cost? How's it going to work? So understanding that sales, right? Having individual customers have very precise and individualized buying strategies is critically important when you're trying to sell a product or a service. Also with therapy, everything is a result of a strategy, including our limitations, problems, fears, worries, and phobias. Here's the thing. When you are experiencing any kind of fear, okay, any kind of worry or some kind of phobia that you may have, okay, this is all done through a process in your mind. Literally, you are running this process in your mind and you're looking at, okay, I had this experience previously in the past and it was scary. And now anytime I think about it or I see a similar situation, then I must feel fear because that is the experience that I had previously. And so now that strategy is with me and it's going on automatically, right? And so the powerful thing here is we can change that. We can change that strategy to a more useful one. Very, very important here to understand that anything that we are doing, any process that we're running can be changed to a more resourceful one. Motivation. We all have a certain motivation strategy. You're either getting motivation internally or you're getting motivation externally from the outside world. Decision strategies, right? We touched upon this in the previous lecture as well, where every decision that we make has a specific strategy. I mentioned to you that I like to make decisions very quickly and change my mind slowly because I like to trust my gut and my intuition. And I know that when something that I need to do or should do feels right and it feels good in my gut, then I pull the trigger and I move quickly because I know that quick decisions are going to be the best way to move forward and to get progress. And here's the thing, it's not always the best decision. However, more often than not, it is. And I know that I may be wrong, right, as far as my decision, but I'm never in doubt. Every decision that I make, I'm always going full force, 100 miles an hour. And I'm like, you know what? I don't care. I'm going to do what I can to make it work. If it doesn't work, hey, no harm, no foul, right? I'll just readjust and make a different decision. And something as simple as what we eat, right? This is all a strategy that we're using about what exactly we like to eat, that process that goes through our mind as to, whether we should buy, candy, junk food versus healthy food, right? Depending on that strategy that we're using. So now I want to share with you the TOTE, called TOTE. And this is essentially a NLP basic strategy pattern. And TOTE stands for test, operation, test, and exit. So just think about like the scientific model or the scientific method where I believe you test and you gather results, you gather feedback, you modify and adjust. This is kind of the similar kind of concept, right? Where we're testing to gather data, to look to see if it's actually working, what we're actually trying to do here. And if it doesn't, then we'll readjust, we'll modify, and then we'll adjust, and then we'll test all over again. So the TOTE begins with an outcome. What are you trying to achieve? To find out what operations a person is using, you have to ask questions such as, what do you do to get your outcome? What specific steps and stages do you go through? What other choices do you have if you have not succeeded at first? When you experience unexpected problems or difficulties, what do you do then? And notice here how these questions are very process oriented, right? Because we're trying to understand a strategy here that somebody is using, or even for ourselves, right? Asking ourselves these questions. What strategy, what process, what steps are we using to make this decision or to get this outcome, right? If it's about sales, what strategy, what are we doing to get an outcome of a sale, right? What is the process that we go through? Same thing with like making a decision. What is the actual step-by-step process that you go through to make a decision? And so once you can understand that, you can really understand that decision-making process of that individual or yourself. So TOTE begins with an outcome, okay? And then the second test is really to see whether that action has reduced the difference between the present state and the desired state. The exit is where no further difference between the present state and the desired state has been achieved. Again, I want you to think about this process here, this concept, this model as the scientific model method, okay? Where you are gathering information, you're testing, you're looking at the results, and you're testing again to see if the same result is happening or if you've achieved the similar outcome. So very, very powerful things here. I definitely want you to try this out, test this out to see if you can really learn different strategies that you're using for your decision making for different areas in your life, so you can really understand what is the process that you're going through to come to this decision here, or to do X or to do Y, whatever that may be in your life, right? That has a specific strategy. Now let's talk about contrasting TOTE's strategy. So this is a way of applying a contrastive analysis to the way you handle two situations. So one where you have your outcome and the other one where you do not, okay? The first one uses an ineffective TOTE strategy. The second one uses a effective strategy, okay? So by comparing and contrasting the two, you can help map resources for the second TOTE for the first. So what I want you to do is think about an unsatisfactory situation, okay? Something that you're having trouble with. So this pattern works best if it involves another person that you're having trouble with. Now think about what you're trying to achieve here. Write down your outcome, okay? What is your desired outcome? How do you judge whether or not you're getting what you want? Are you going to be seeing, hearing, feeling a certain type of way, right, when you actually achieve that outcome? And what signs do you pay attention to? What specifically is going to tell you that you have achieved that outcome? What specific feedback are you paying attention to? Are you going to be, involved with a certain person? Is somebody going to be there for you? Is someone going to be there at your side, right? Very, very specifically here, you need to look at the specific feedback or the information that you're getting back. And what specific actions are you taking to get what you want? Now what I want you to do is think of a similar situation where you did get what you wanted and the situation went well. It may be with the same person, but it may be with a completely different person in a whole different situation, okay? Write down your answers to the same questions about that situation, okay? Now compare the two sets of answers, okay? How could you see the resources from one successful situation in the difficult situation? What extra goals or things could you do and set in the difficult situation that would make the difference? What type of new feedback could you pay attention to? How many different ways can you think of what you want to get in that situation? How can you think about the other person in a positive way, right? Because we're trying to have a win-win scenario here. We're trying to utilize a strategy that will work for everyone, right? So that we can come across like we're trying to really, solve a problem here and get a desired outcome. Now, future pace, okay? This is really, really important here. This is where you're looking at the future and you're picturing what's going on, okay? So imagine the next time that you'll be faced with the same person in a difficult situation. And imagine that you have the resources that you just have discovered, right? That you just discovered through contrasting the two different TOTEs, okay? Mentally rehearse the situation and notice how it will be different. As you're going through this course, you're noticing that a lot of different techniques here are for helping you resolve conflict, resolve unpleasant experiences or unpleasant memories that you're using processes, right? Different strategies to essentially implement into your reality. So as you go through all these different exercises and techniques, notice how we're using a lot of future pacing, a lot of experience changing, a lot of submodality changing, because once you can change the process, the strategy, the submodalities of any kind of situation, then you can turn that negative experience that you attach a negative meaning to into a positive one, because you're more resourceful. Most of the time, people will attach a negative experience to a situation, to an event, because they are unresourceful. They don't know what they don't know, right? So that's going to be it here for this video, and we'll see you on the next one. In this video, we're going to go over strategy elicitation. So when we're eliciting somebody's strategy, We're essentially figuring out the process that they use to make a decision to essentially get a certain outcome. Now, when it comes to eliciting somebody's strategy, right, there's going to be times where you want to discover and really find out what strategy a particular person is using to get a specific outcome, okay? And there may be another time where you want to model a strategy from a specific person, right, that you want to be more alike. And if somebody has a strategy that's not very useful, then you can actually change that into a more resourceful strategy. So if you want to work with clients and you want to become like an NLP practitioner and you want to help people get, very specific outcomes and help them with their strategies and everything, this is going to be a technique here that you can use to help you understand and elicit their strategy. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to associate the person in the strategy. Either provide context where they can demonstrate it right away, right here, right now. Let's just say, for example, that this is going to be for a decision-making strategy, okay? So ask them to make a decision about something small. What are you going to eat tomorrow? Or what's the process that you use to decide what you're going to eat for dinner or for breakfast, right? Now, you want to keep them associated, all right? You want them to be using present tense language because you don't want them to get into any kind of memory strategies. If they're having to kind of go back and remember this and that and all this stuff, you don't want to get into that. You want to look at what they're actually doing to make that decision right there and then in the present state. And then you want to ask them to take you through their strategy step by step. So use all the possible clues to map their strategy. Very key distinction here is that you want to distinguish between sequential steps and simultaneous steps, okay? So when they're using the word then, that's going to be a sequential step, okay? And then a simultaneous step is when they're using the word and, right? And then this happened, and then that happened. And you want to pay very close attention to the process of the strategy. Don't get into what the strategy is being used for, okay? You only want to see and really know what the process of that strategy looks like. Step 1, they're doing this. Step 2, they're doing that. Step 3, they're, doing this over here. That's what you want to get. You want to get the step-by-step process that they're using. And then you can go back and use the TOTE questions to find the strategy details, right? Remember those questions that we went through? How are you going about making X decision? Or how do you know when you have X, right? Those kind of questions that we went over in the TOTE example. And then you want to identify the critical submodalities involved. Are they talking about this is, big, this is large, this is small, this is, in this color, it's, over here to the left, it's over there to the right. Very, very important there to understand these submodalities. So ask for the outcome, okay? What are you trying to achieve by doing this? And what's the first step in your process? Keep asking the next steps. And then what do you do next? Ask how the person moves from one step to the next. What do you pay attention to as you go through the steps? How do you know that it's now time to go on to step 2, to step 3? What are the different things that you're seeing, that you're hearing, that you're feeling that tell you it's now time to move on to the next step? And then ask for their exit point. What lets you know when you have achieved your outcome? Is there something that you're seeing, hearing, feeling? And here's the thing, the exit point is normally determined by a critical submodality. For example, so when the mental picture becomes bright enough or when the feeling becomes strong enough, then the person knows that they have achieved their outcome. So this is a great way for you to elicit somebody's strategy, and you can also use this on yourself, right? To elicit your own strategies. That could be one of the best things you do for yourself, is taking some time and understanding the processes, the strategies that you're using to make decisions in your life, to do different things in your life, and being able to become aware of them and then change them to more resourceful strategies. So that's going to be it here for this video, and we'll see you on the next one. In this video, we're going to go over the new behavior generator strategy. So let's go right ahead and jump into this. So with this particular strategy, this helps you improve an existing skill or learn a new one. You can use it for your own personal development or for coaching others if you're working with clients. And so the principles for the new behavior generator are: number 1, imagine your goal in context, a specific context that you want to be in. And it has to be in a very specific context. You can't say, I want to be more confident. Okay, well, confident in what context? You want to be more confident at work, in your daily job, or you want to be more confident with the opposite sex, you want to be more confident in sports. What specific context do you want to be more confident in? Okay, very, very powerful there. Make sure that you distinguish that context. Number 2, use disassociated mental rehearsal for learning. Okay, you want to be able to look at yourself in the act. Okay, and then number 3, use associated mental rehearsal for practice and improvement. This is where you're actually in the situation, in the actual experience, looking at it through your own eyes. So decide what you want to improve or what new behavior you want to learn. You may want to respond maybe more resourcefully in a particular situation. You may want to maybe control your anger. Maybe you get upset very quickly and you want to maybe reduce your anger when it comes to, conflicting situations. Or maybe you want to improve your sports performance or training or even your presentation skills in front of a crowd or a group. So the first step is the auditory internal dialogue. Ask yourself, very, very important here, really ask yourself, what do I want to do differently? How would I look and sound if I were doing that exactly as I want to do? Remember, this is something where you have to be able to imagine what you're doing in your mind and seeing it exactly how you want to see in order for you to make really any kind of change. We are creating our reality every single day. We're imagining these different things. We're imagining that. And we are acting in accordance to what we're imagining, what we're creating. If we imagine that, tomorrow's going to be a, really bad day. I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to do that and all this stuff. Well, guess what? You've just created that reality for tomorrow. The universe and things in the actual environment are going to make it so that that reality comes true for you. Allow the pictures and the sounds to emerge, okay? Look up and see yourself performing the skill as you want and as you would rather have it be than maybe, where you're currently at, where maybe you're not so good, okay? Now, when you're satisfied, associate into the picture, right? Because previously, you're looking at it from a disassociated picture where you're looking at yourself performing that skill right up there on the screen or up there on stage, okay? Now you want to associate into the picture. Imagine yourself actually doing what you're seeing or what you saw, right? And then look down to access that kinesthetic system. How does this feel? If it doesn't feel right, then go back to step 3 and make further adjustments. Very, very important here. You want to be able to modify and adjust and get data as quickly as possible. And don't think about it as failure or you not getting it right. It's all about just gathering information and making the proper adjustments. And if other people are involved, what will be the effect on them? Are they going to be clapping at your performance and how great it was? Are they going to be surprised at just how good you are, right? Very, very important there to look at and see, right, exactly how it'll affect them. And when you're happy with your performance from an associated perspective, think about which cue or trigger will remind you to use that new skill in the future. Okay, so future pace that. Imagine that trigger happening. Imagine responding in a new way and enjoy the feeling that you have about that. When you can tie emotions, right, feelings to that particular experience, that makes the world of difference. Because remember, your neurology doesn't know whether or not you're actual doing something in reality or whether you're imagining it. You want to create these new neural pathways in your brain so that this actually becomes reality for you in the real world, right? You manifest that, and it all starts in the mind. Everything starts from thought, from being able to think about something, see it in our mind, and then be able to create that in the real world. So this is a very powerful strategy here. I recommend you do this several times if you want to get better at this. And also remember to utilize your emotions. Always tie your emotions to how you want your actual feelings to be when you're in that moment and you're experiencing that great experience. So that's going to be it here for this video, and we'll see you on the next one. In this video, we're going to go over the power of language. One of the things to keep in mind when it comes to language is that language structures consciousness. The words that we use, the different phrases that we use really help us understand our conscious reality. And so we're going to go very in depth in here into understanding language. And so let's go right ahead and jump into this. So NLP explores how our thoughts are affected by words, right? Leading to action. So that's where the neuro linguistic programming comes from. Language is part of being human, right? It's pretty much, the basis of all social life. We use language to essentially influence and persuade, to get our point across, to get people to acknowledge our opinion, or to get them to take a certain action, right? Because we're always influencing and persuading whether we know it or not. That's the sole purpose of language and communication, right? Is to influence and persuade. So in terms of creating our reality, we create our own reality from our sense experience, right? VAKOG, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, and gustatory representational systems that we use to essentially interpret our experience and our reality. This is essentially what our territory is. This is what is real to us. Then we talk about it using words and language. Now, one of the things that you want to be aware of is not confusing words with the experience that they represent, because they're going to lead to 3 misunderstandings. Number 1, we translate our experience into language and mistake the language for the experience when it's really an incomplete reflection. We may think that our experience is constructed as the same way that the language is being used when we talk about that particular situation inside those limits. Here's the thing. When it comes to words and language, a lot of times it's not enough for us to use language and words to fully express a situation. Because we can use words to persuade, to influence, to expand our awareness, to set different frames, and be able to get people to essentially think in our terms, then it's really limited as far as our language, because we would have to, go through a thesaurus to know all these different words and words for different words, and really getting all this, complication going. But at the end of the day, we're not able to explain fully our experience just through language itself. And so number 2, we mistakenly assume that others share our assumptions, so we leave out vital parts of our message. So just think about if I said, she went to the store and got the stuff. Well, I'm leaving out a lot of information there, right? Who is she? And what stuff did she grab? And what store did she go to? We often tend to speak in those types of terms, right? In that kind of language where the other person doesn't know what those things are. And so we tend to communicate assuming that they know what we're talking about, when a lot of times they have no idea. And unknowingly, we tend to mislead them. And number 3, we misunderstand others because we fill in the gaps in the words from our own map of reality, rather than finding out their map. So remember when I made the statement about that she went to the store to get the stuff. Okay, well, they are essentially putting in she into what they think or feel that she is. And in the store, they're going to think about what store is familiar to them. And the stuff, well, they're going to use their own map of reality to determine, right, and paint a picture in their mind of what that stuff is. And so when we're not clear about what we're talking about, that leads to others filling in the gaps for us, for themselves. And this can lead to confusion and misleading. And so you do not want to do that. So we think in words as well as sight, sounds, and feelings, right? Taste and smell through our VAKOG. However, language is not a primary experience like all the other sensory experiences, right? Words are anchors for experience. They induce states and they reflect ideas and understanding. So that's going to be it here for this video, and we'll see you on the next one. In this video, we're going to talk about deletions, generalizations, and distortions. This is critical here for you to understand, because most of the information, the experiences that we go through, right, that happen to us and that, we experience in our everyday lives are typically deleted, generalized, and distorted. And it's important for you to realize this, because oftentimes we'll recall memories, we'll recall experiences, and we're going to generalize different things that happen to us and not get the whole entire picture. So very excited to get into this topic here. Let's go right ahead and jump in. So when we speak in terms of our language, we take the richness of our sensory experience and attempt to convey it with words. However, the experience is just way too much for us to oftentimes explain with words, because a lot of the information, as I mentioned, is distorted, it's deleted, or it's generalized. And so the experience is transformed into three ways when we do this, okay? When we try to convey our experience with simple words. Number one, deletion. We leave out some aspects. We only recall certain things that are, really important to us or that made a significant impact, and we tend to forget others that may not be as useful to us. And number two, generalization. We take one example and have that represent all situations. For example, if somebody says, "I'm not confident." Well, here's the thing. Is there ever not an experience that they've had where they've been confident, right? They cannot say that they've never ever been confident, because there's been situations in their lives where they have been, right? So very, very important there to understand when somebody is using those kind of statements where, I'm never going to do X, or I'm just, depressed, or I'm stressed. Well, they're not always like that. They're not always in that situation. So what they're doing there is they're generalizing for every particular situation moving forward. And then number three, distortion. We give more weight to some aspects than others. So if something was a negative experience and it was just like, oh my gosh, this whole negative experience, happened like this or happened like that, or you had an experience with somebody else and they look at it from their own perspective and they say, yeah, you know what? It wasn't very good. It was, all right. And then from your perspective, you're like, oh man, it was the greatest thing ever. It was just all of this, all of that. I just, couldn't even get enough of it. It was just the best thing ever, right? So that's an example of distortion. So look at this picture over here to the right, okay? You're going to see we have a sensory experience, right, coming in. It then gets deleted, distorted, and generalized, right? And then it goes into our internal representation, and then it gets deleted and distorted and generalized again, okay? And then it goes into spoken words, right? Language. So look at the filters there, right? It's several filters there that it goes through, because you can't remember every single little thing that happened, right? Your unconscious is doing this. It's taking care of this for you. If you were to, have to be responsible and consciously think about when to breathe, or how fast your heartbeat should be beating, or all these different things that your unconscious takes care of, you wouldn't be able to function. So understand that when we're talking, right, when we're using language to communicate, it often comes through several different filters that it's gone through. And so when it's actually spoken, a lot of the information is left out, deleted, or generalized. So with deletion, right, we mentioned that when information comes in, we tend to forget some parts or not really recall them because they're not really important to us, or they're less important to us than really other parts that are more beneficial for us to remember. Or we just didn't notice them at that time. We didn't have the proper awareness to even know that we needed to know this or know about that. And with generalization, when we experience any kind of event or situation that is good or bad, remember, and it's not necessarily good or bad, it's either is it useful or is it not, okay? We tend to generalize it. And then when distortion comes how we change our experience. We can distort this in many ways. We can look at a situation and think it was, larger than life, the best thing ever, all this stuff, when really it probably wasn't the best thing ever. It was probably okay, but we tend to maybe, blow things out of proportion. So think about it that way, that any time that you have any kind of experience, right, it's going in through your sensory experience, it's getting deleted, generalized, and distorted, going into then your internal representational systems, and then again, it's going through that other filter, deleting, distorting, and generalizing, and then boom, you have words and language that go out and that you speak, right, to others, and a lot of information there is left out. So very, very important for you to understand that most of what people say has these filters that they've gone through in order for them to actually be able to speak those words, that language. Okay, so very, very important here. And that's going to be here for this video, and we'll see you on the next one. In this video, we're going to talk about the power of questions. So questions are extremely powerful and important for you to be able to understand different people, understand where they're coming from, understand the strategies and the processes that they're using, so that we can, know how to communicate with them more effectively, and be able to build more rapport. So very excited to get this going here. Let's go right ahead and jump in. So the power of questions, right? We can avoid a lot of different misunderstandings by simply asking questions to recover information, clarify meaning, and to add choice. Remember in the last section that we talked about the information that comes in through our sensory experience and is deleted, distorted, and generalized. So with questions, we can help recover that missing data, that missing information, right? And questions can be asked from different perceptual positions. They can be internal, directed towards yourself, or external, directed towards others. They can be very direct, right? When you're trying to seek the truth or when you're trying to make a command. It can be very manipulative by trying to get your desired outcome by essentially harming the other person, right? They can also contain assumptions. And when you can actually ask questions to really understand somebody's model of the world, that's where you're going to build a ton of rapport, because it shows that you're curious and it shows that you're willing and wanting to learn more about that individual. Questions are extremely powerful here, and there's really two types of questions, okay? There's open and closed-ended questions. So questions that are closed, right? These are questions such as yes or no. Are you going to the store tomorrow? Yes. Are you going to, be at XYZ place tomorrow? No, right? Whatever that may be, where it's a definitive yes or no, right? And open-ended questions are those that open possibilities and cannot be answered with a simple yes or no. These kind of questions I use all the time when I'm talking to clients, right? When I'm talking to clients or when I'm talking to coaching students, I'm always asking questions that are open-ended because I don't want them to give me a simple yes or no. I want them to put some thought behind the response. And I'm trying to get maybe a process, a strategy, a way of how they're coming to their actual answer, okay? And it's very, very important there to understand that when you can ask more open-ended questions, you can get more information, you can build more rapport, and you can get a better understanding of how that person is coming up with the response, right? This is a great way for you to have in any kind of sales interaction where you are wanting to learn more about, let's say, their sales process, or if they're using a particular product or service already and how it may be working for them, or if they're having trouble with it, right? You want to try to stay away as much as you can from simple yes or no questions unless you're using them strategically, right? A good example here I'll give you is the yes set, where I can ask somebody a question. Hey, John, if I can show you a way to reduce your costs, increase your revenue, would you be open to listening to what I have to say? Yes. Okay, great. If I can show you a way that you could, increase your revenue 10x in the next 30 days, would you be open to listening? Yes. Right? So you get the point. When I'm getting people to agree with me, and typically you want to have 3 yeses there where people are saying yes, 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 and then they're getting into a light trance. And so at that time, they can become more suggestible, and then you can then start asking different types of open-ended questions. So very, very powerful there. The power of questions is extremely important here, and really look to use open-ended questions as much as you can to understand how they're coming to that particular response. So that's going to be it here for this video, and we'll see you on the next one. In this video, we're going to cover the meta model. Now, the meta model is something where we're able to extract and really gather information that is typically going to be deleted right through our filters, because oftentimes when we're communicating, we're leaving out a lot of information, right? Because we're distorting it, we're deleting it, or we're typically generalizing it. So very, very important here as far as the meta model to really help you understand when you're either talking to a client, if you're doing client work, or for even yourself, right? When you're saying different things, you can really get to the bottom of why you're feeling this certain way and recover that missing piece of information. So let's go right ahead and jump into this. So as I mentioned previously, the meta model is a language pattern that really helps us reconnect and really get that information that is missing, where we're typically deleting, distorting, and generalizing pieces of information. With the meta model, we can essentially use questions that reverse engineer the working surface structure so that we can go deeper and actually get the deep structures that are involved in the language. Now, when you're doing this with, let's say, a client, or when you're doing this with maybe even yourself, it's really important that you build rapport and you're coming across with softening statements, such as, you know what, I really appreciate you sharing that with me just so I understand you a little bit better. Hey, how or why or how are you going about this process, or what's the process that you go through to, get to that conclusion or to come to this point, right? So very, very important that you understand that, because if you're just coming across challenging people and you're asking why and you're asking, well, how and all this stuff, then you're going to turn a lot of people off. It can come across very negative, like you're just trying to cause problems. So very important that when you're asking these types of questions, you have rapport established and you're using softening type of statements that let them know that you're curious, that you're interested in learning more to be able to understand them better, okay? So ultimately, the meta model really just gathers information. And that's really the difference here between the meta model and the Milton model. The Milton model is the language of trance, and it's very vague. In contrast, the meta model is very specific. We're using the meta model to really gather the information. And as far as hypnosis or using the Milton model, that is the language of trance and being able to get people to essentially get into a certain trance and then be able to input different pieces of information that you want that are needed for that specific individual. So very, very powerful here. Understand that the meta model is getting clarity. And that's why I have this image here on the right of the clear water, because that's really what the meta model is doing. It's giving us clarity on our language so that we can recover pieces of information so we can see right through, what we're actually talking about, right? So it clarifies meaning. It's giving us a systemic framework that's asking, hey, what exactly do you mean? Or what's your process that you're using to come to that conclusion? Right? We want to get an understanding of what is being left out here and how they're using their processes, right, to collect and gather this information. And it also identifies limits. So this is where people will typically, use generalizations where I'm not good enough or I can never do anything right. And then they use these generalizations in every single facet of their life, when in reality, you can really question them and ask them, okay, well, has there ever been a time when you've done something right? And so when you're able to challenge their limiting beliefs, right, then you're able to really let them know that they're generalizing and they can get a lot more clarity and awareness. Most people, when they're using kind of generalizations, they don't have the awareness that there's other choices out there and that there's more resources available to them, because you can break down people's language so much so that you can find out some things that may scare you. Because if you meta model yourself and you ask yourself all these questions like, well, why specifically are you doing this? And how are you doing this? Or what specifically about this is regarding this over here? And so you can really get to the root cause of a particular problem or an area that is, being neglected. This is the true essence and the true power here of the meta model, is getting down to the deep core structure, right, of what somebody is actually trying to communicate, or a specific problem that they have that they're really generalizing, they're deleting, they're distorting. Very, very important information there. And as I mentioned also, it gives you more awareness, more choice, so that you can use different types of words, different types of phrases, so that you can expand your map of the world. So this is a meta model here, very, very powerful tool. So that's going to be it here for this video, and we'll see you on the next one. In this video, we're going to go over the meta model patterns. So in the previous video, we talked about the meta model and how powerful it truly is to be able to extract information, missing pieces that we typically will leave out when we're communicating, right? We're deleting, we're distorting, we're generalizing our language, and the meta model gives us that tool, the ability to be able to extract that important information that we are missing so that we can really clarify what it is that we're trying to accomplish, right? The communication that we're trying to get across, and helps us really get that clarity. So in this section, we're going to cover several meta model patterns. So let's go right ahead and jump into this. In the previous lectures, we talked about deletions. And so now we're going to go into the language patterns or the language structure that a lot of people use when they're either deleting or distorting information. And a simple deletion is when something important is missed out of a sentence. So for this example here, go out and do it. That's important. I feel bad. I don't know about that. With those examples, how do we know what specifically is going on there? Or go and do it. Well, go and do what? What specifically? That's important. Important according to whom? And what specifically is it that's important, right? I feel bad. Well, according to whom? Why do you feel bad, right? So very, very important here to understand the kind of language that most people will use when they are deleting information. And then we have comparison. So a comparison compares one thing to another in order to evaluate it. So for example, he's a better player. Well, he's a better player according to whom? Who is he, actually judging against, right? Because he can be a better player in comparison to somebody who isn't very good in the first place, right? So very important there. They're leaving out very key information that is making that statement, very general, very vague. So just think about statements that say, I'm the best, or I'm the only one that can do X, Y, and Z, or I'm the best one that can do X, Y, and Z, right? Those kind of statements leave out a comparison. Who are they comparing to? Right? I'm the top guy in my class. According to who? Right? And so very, very important there that when somebody's using kind of comparison type of language, they're comparing a couple different things, then you need to be aware of that and understand that, they're really generalizing this statement, and we need to retrieve that missing piece of information as far as who they're actually comparing against. Then we have judgments, and judgments are opinions which are expressed as if they were facts. So some examples of this is you are insensitive, or that is not good enough. Children should be seen and not heard. Okay, well, all of these are judgment-based statements. And when you're saying like, hey, you're insensitive, according to who? What criteria are you measuring that lets you know that I'm being insensitive, right? So very important here to understand these types of statements. So when somebody is saying this is not good enough, okay, well, this is not good enough according to whom? By what criteria are you measuring this to be not good enough, right? Very important here. We're trying to get that missing piece of information. And remember to use softening statements whenever you're trying to retrieve this information, or else you're going to come across like you're just trying to attack them, and you're just not really going to come across very pleasantly, okay? So remember that you must have rapport when you're trying to extract this information. Next, we have universals. And universals are patterns of generalization. These are words such as always, never, everybody, nobody, right? And so here's the thing. People that are using these statements are using this across all spectrums as far as them not being good enough or them not being able to do something in all contexts, right? And the most important thing here to understand is that people are not going to be experiencing, one state, right, in all different facets of their life. So if somebody is saying, I'm always depressed, you can easily challenge that by saying, has there ever been a moment where you haven't been depressed? Other statements such as, I'll never be able to do that. Well, will you never be able to do that? According to who? Other statements such as, everything is going wrong. Well, is everything going wrong in every single context of your life, right? Obviously, it's not. And questions that really kind of get them to understand and know that, everything isn't going wrong in every single area of my life, because I'm sure you can recall an area of your life that isn't going wrong, right? So it's important here to really help people see the true light and be able to understand that, their universal statements are not true, because it's not true across all contexts for that specific, language that they're using. It's only within this one context. They may be, stressed out in, whatever type of situation or area at that time, but that doesn't mean that they're always stressed or they're always depressed in every single area of their life, every single day, all the time, right? So very, very important there to understand the universals. Model operators of possibility. Now, these are words to set rules about what is possible, using the words can't, cannot, possible, can, impossible, right? These are essentially defining what the speaker's views are as far as possibilities. For example, some people will use, I just couldn't refuse this, or I can never relax, or I can't relax, or I can't do that. And then you want to ask, well, how do you know? How do you know that you can't do that, right? You want to get information to really get them to clarify why they have this type of language in the first place. Why are they expressing it this way? Why do they feel that they can't do this? And oftentimes it may be a limiting belief that they have, right? So let's say somebody is saying, I can't start a business, or I cannot, become an entrepreneur and start my own online business. Okay, well, why can't you do that? Why do you feel that you can't start an online business? And they'll give you a lot of, cause and effect statements because of this, because of that. But in reality, it probably is a little bit more deeper, and it has to do with limiting beliefs as to why they believe that statement to be true, right? Because whether or not that statement is true is really up to them, because they get to decide whether they feel that they can or cannot. Okay, so very important here to understand the model operators of possibility and the limitations here. And then we have the model operators of necessity. And these are a set of rules that really let us know that something is necessary or it's appropriate. Now, these consist of words such as should, shouldn't, ought to, must not. And some example phrases are, I have to go, or I must go now, or I must do better, or you ought to listen to me when I tell you this. Okay, well, you got to look at who is saying that I should go, or, as far as should, or, I ought to. Well, according to whom, right? What is the reasoning behind why you feel that I should do this, or that I ought to do this, or that I shouldn't do this, right? So you want to get a fundamental understanding of their process here. Why do they feel that they shouldn't, or they should, or even for yourself, right? This is going to be a very powerful tool here with the meta model and all these different patterns, right? For yourself, and also for if you're wanting to work with clients, to be able to help get fundamental understandings of why they're deleting, distorting, and generalizing information. So the next one here is nominalizations. And these are essentially the result of a verb being used and turned into an abstract noun. So let me give you an example of this. So let's say somebody is saying, our communication isn't going well. Well, you can respond with, how are you communicating? And then another example here could be, I have a lot of stress on my job. Okay, well, what is pressuring you? How are you stressing out? What specifically are you stressing out about? Another example is somebody who's saying, the decision is final. Okay, well, what are you deciding? How have you gone about deciding as far as, this final decision here, right? What is that process? So remember, we're trying to gather information here. We're trying to extract data that isn't necessarily there on the surface. And then we have mind reading. And mind reading is where you presume to know another person's internal state without any evidence, or you're just assuming something. And so what you're essentially doing is you're projecting your map of the world onto others. And this is essentially what we do every single day. We're projecting our views, our kind of view of the world, our map of the world onto others. And we're thinking that they see the same things that we see in our mind and have the same exact map, when in reality, we all have our unique map of what we, see reality to be for us. And some of these examples are, I know you don't like me, or they think that I'm an idiot, or you're only doing that to annoy me. All of these are great for responding with, well, how do you know? What specifically about that is telling you that they don't like you, or that they think that you're an idiot? What information are you gathering to tell you this, right? Because remember, this is all about assuming. And what people are saying here is statements that really assume what the other people have in their mind, when in reality, it may be the furthest from the truth. but this is kind of what our assumptions are. And just think about when, you are, let's say, maybe dating somebody or looking to date somebody, and you are, texting back and forth, and, for whatever reason, you text somebody back and they don't text you back within a given set of time, right? You have all these thoughts go through your mind, and you'll think like, hey, maybe he doesn't like me, or maybe she doesn't like me, or maybe he's just, this or that. And so you have all these assumptions going in your mind, when it could really be ultimately down to they're busy, right? They don't have time to respond. And so this is something to really, really be aware of, because these will hinder you and hinder individuals that are using these all the time, because you don't know what the other person is thinking, and you don't want to project your kind of model of the world onto theirs, because they're not going to agree, and there's going to be trouble there, right? There's going to be problems. So when somebody is using this type of language, or when you are, look to find out how they're going about this process, and how do they know that so-and-so doesn't like them, or so-and-so thinks that they're an idiot, right? So very, very important and powerful information here. Cause and effect. This is something where somebody is implying one person's behavior can make, essentially cause, right, another person to respond in a certain way. And so this is essentially almost playing the blame game here, right? Where you're utilizing something externally, or some other thing, right, out there, that is causing you to feel this certain way, and typically unresourceful, right? Have unresourceful behavior. And so it's very limiting for somebody to use these types of statements, because it's essentially saying that something's out of your control, something out of your control happened or made you feel this certain way, right? And some examples of this are, she scares me. Okay, well, what specifically about her is scaring you? And who is she? Right? And when somebody is saying the news made me upset, well, what specifically about the news is making you upset, right? This is where somebody is letting external forces, right, dictate how they feel and in what particular state that they're in. Very important here to understand that somebody is using cause and effect statements when they're placing the blame essentially on something else out of them, right, externally, that is making them feel this certain way. Right? So you want to be able to extract information there and understand, okay, well, what specifically here is going on? It's not that somebody else is making you feel this way or unresourceful state, is that you have attached meaning to that external event or that external source, and has made you, right, act in this certain way, right? Then we have the presupposition. So this is essentially stating something where you automatically assume that that person has the same map of the world as you. And this is where you're using statements such as, when are you going to act responsibly? Well, responsibly according to who, right? You want to get that missing piece of information, because acting responsibly can be one thing to one person and then one thing to another. And it's assuming that they're not already acting responsibly, right? So very, very important here that when you hear these types of statements, they're assuming that you are not acting in accordance in a certain way, or it's just as simply you not being able to see, their perspective from their point of view, from their map of the world. And with this other statement here, you're not going to tell me another lie, are you? This is assuming that you've told lies previously, right? And you're asking the question whether or not they're going to continue to tell you lies. So remember, presuppositions are when people are assuming that something has taken place or that something has already happened, and they're trying to place their map of the world, right, their map of reality onto yours. Now, a very powerful way for you to use a meta model is to use it on yourself. I mentioned this previously as well, where you can use this on your own internal dialogue, right? Notice all the different patterns that you use, the different types of phrases and statements that you're using, and be able to use these meta model patterns on yourself, right? That's going to help you out tremendously with yourself, to be able to really understand where you're coming from, but then also be able to help others. Maybe you're working with clients, to be able to clarify what they're saying and be able to get that real picture and that real criteria as to why they're making these types of statements. So use this model here to get your internal clarity that'll help you be more effective and successful in whatever you do in your life. So that's going to be it here for this video, and we'll see you on the next one. In this video, we're going to go over how to use the meta model. So we've talked previously in the other lectures about what the meta model is, the different types of language structures that people use, right? The different types of phrases that they're using. And in this particular lecture here, we're going to cover exactly how you can use the meta model to be able to get the most amount of information out from either yourself or from others that you're actually working with. So let's go right ahead and jump in here. And now I mentioned this in the previous lecture that really the best way to use a meta model is to use it on your own internal dialogue and really notice and understand how you're actually creating your internal reality with the words that you say to yourself, okay? Very, very powerful and important here that you understand that what you're telling yourself internally, the words you're using, the phrases, whether they're positive or negative, become aware of how that is actually creating your external world. Because if you tell yourself that you're not very good or that you're not very confident or all these different types of negative internal dialogue, right? Then that's going to reflect into your external world and that's going to be your reality. So very important here to understand that what you're telling yourself internally is not necessarily what's always true, but it's typically just kind of running on autopilot. So look to become aware of what you're telling yourself and whether or not if it's useful for you or if it's not. As you start to become more aware of your internal dialogue, then it's going to be extremely helpful for you to be able to understand where you're coming from and the limitations that you're placing on yourself. With the power of the meta model, it gives you that internal clarity. And we talked previously about asking questions, right, with the meta model only when you have rapport. Rapport has to be established, and you have to use also very soft questions. You need to be able to not come across like you're trying to be intrusive, like you're being aggressive, like you're trying to challenge them, right? So very important to use softening statements and even soften your tone and your voice, okay? So when you say, "What exactly do you mean?" right? That's kind of defensive. That's kind of challenging versus, I'm curious, just so I can understand you better, what exactly do you mean here? Or what exactly do you mean by that? Notice how I lowered my tonality and I'm coming more from a curious state of mind. So really using those soft statements, right? I wonder, what exactly you mean by X? Or that's really interesting. I'm curious, just so I can understand you better. Hey, what's going on over here? Or, tell me a little bit about X, right? So really important here. You want to be in rapport, okay? You want to be asking questions with softening statements before them and making sure that you're lowering down your tonality so you're not coming across like you're trying to challenge them or you're trying to be intrusive. And really the most important part here of the meta model is to become aware, right, of when you need to recover information, clarify meaning, and then open other choices for yourself and for others, right? Because you're probably taking this course to either, work on yourself or to work with clients. And this is a fantastic way to help clarify meaning here. So start listening to your own speech, right? Your own phrases, the own words that you're using with yourself and with others. And you're going to start to train yourself quickly and easily to recognize these patterns, right? So you can really understand what you need to clarify and the information that you need to gather so you can get a complete picture. So that's going to be it here for this video, and we'll see you on the next one. In this video, we're going to talk about the unconscious mind. So let's go right ahead and jump in here. In the world of NLP, the unconscious mind means anything that is not in our present moment of awareness, okay? So whatever that you're not aware of right now, you're breathing, you don't sit there and think about how many breaths you got to take or when to breathe, right? Or, when your heart should beat. That's all handled by our unconscious mind, because if we had to, focus in on that and actually, be worried about that, then we wouldn't be able to function properly, right? So the unconscious mind is essentially made up of all these different mental processes that continue and go on without our knowledge consciously. The unconscious mind has all of our different values, our most deepest thoughts, dreams, desires, and aspirations. And the unconscious mind uses indirect communication and responds to symbols and metaphors rather than language, right? Somebody can understand a metaphor a lot more easier. And one of the things that you want to become aware of is that the unconscious mind doesn't work with language directly, right? And it doesn't process negatives. Very important here. So when you're saying, don't do X or do X. It's the same thing for the unconscious mind because X is represented in both. And so this is why negative outcomes don't work very well. When somebody says, I want to lose weight, or I want to quit smoking, or I want to stop smoking, right? The unconscious mind sees that as a negative. And if we want to have real change, if we want to create real long lasting change, we want to say things in the positive, always having positive statements. So for example, I want to live a more healthier life. Statements such as those that are stated in the positive will go directly into the unconscious mind and will help you start achieving your outcome. Remember, don't focus on statements and thoughts, right, that have to do with negative outcomes. Don't talk about what you don't want, talk about what you do want, right? Because it's the same thing with, the law of attraction. When you talk about things that you don't want in your life, I don't want this, I don't want that, well, you're attracting more of that because it's going into your unconscious mind, right? And so you're manifesting that in your real world versus you saying, this is what I want. This is exactly what I want here, and all stated in the positive. That's where you're going to have a lot more impact and a lot more change. Now with trance, this is a state of consciousness that is an internal focus of attention, okay? And the more that you focus on the internal world of your own thoughts, your own feelings, right? Your own desires, the less attention you'll pay to the external world because it's all about your internal world that tells you how you feel about yourself, okay? Because you shouldn't focus and rely on others telling you that you're not very good or that you're not this or that you're this or you're that, right? Because in reality, all that matters is what you think about yourself, right? Your own self-worth, your own self-esteem is what's going to really play a factor in the external world. If you're letting others dictate how you should feel about yourself in the external world, then you're at the mercy of what they tell you, right? And how you should feel about yourself. And so when you're in trance, you can go very, very deep. And the deeper that you go, the deeper that you go internally until you eventually go to sleep. There's a lot of different, states of trance. You got theta state, you got beta state, you got all these different states, right? And it all depends on what you're trying to accomplish. And one of the things that we do throughout our days is that we tend to drift in and out of trance unknowingly. So just think about a movie. When you go to a movie theater and you're sitting there and you're watching the movie, as soon as it starts, you're just completely engulfed in the experience. And I bet you that you cannot remember the exact moment that you went into that trance because 2.5 hours will pass by and it'll be the end of the movie and you'll be experiencing all these different emotions throughout the movie, but you won't be able to remember, when exactly you got into that state because time moves extremely fast when you're in a trance. So remember, the unconscious mind is everything that is not in our present moment of awareness. It's essentially driving the bus for us. It's driving all of our actions, our desires, our thoughts, our feelings. And when we can get people into trances or hypnotic states, then we can implant new and more resourceful information. Same thing for ourselves, because we can actually hypnotize ourselves through certain language and implant certain triggers, certain anchors into our own mind to help us become more resourceful as well. So very, very important here to have a fundamental understanding of how the unconscious mind works and how we can use it to our advantage. So that's going to be it here for this video, and we'll see you on the next one. In this video, we're going to cover the Milton model. Now, the Milton model is completely different and complete opposite of the meta model. The meta model is very specific, right? We're trying to gather and extract information that is missing. And then with the Milton model, it's essentially where we're trying to communicate in very vague language. So if you think about it, most people that need help with the meta model, right? They're the ones that are using Milton model language in their everyday lives. And so what we can do is use Milton model language to get others in a trance, or even to get ourselves in a trance, so that we can input specific information into our unconscious mind. So let's go right ahead and jump into this here. So as I mentioned, the Milton model is really language patterns that induce trance or altered states of consciousness. And so more specifically here, the meta model chunks language down, okay? This is where we're able to get specific, right? And where we can gather the information that is being deleted, distorted, or generalized. And the Milton model chunks language up. This is more general, more kind of 50,000 foot view and very vague, that helps us focus on unconscious resources. So if you look at the two images over here to the right, you can see, as we mentioned, the meta model chunks language down, becomes more specific, moves from deep structures to surface structures by challenging the deletions, distortions, and generalizations. Now, the Milton model is where we're chunking language up. We're becoming more general, right? More vague. And it moves from the surface structures to the deep structure by generating the deletions, the distortions, and the generalizations. So you can see here that they go hand in hand, where you can use the meta model to extract information and then use the Milton model to get somebody into a trance and place specific information that we want to have in there. And so all the Milton model patterns can be used to induce a trance, right? To get somebody into a hypnotic state. So with deletions, you can use language such as, you can learn comfortably. This deletion allows the other person to think about what and how it is most appropriate for them. So what you're doing here is, when you're using these kind of statements, they're going back into the unconscious mind and they're pulling information, data, right? Pictures, images, all this different type of information that is in their unconscious mind. And then they can attach, right, whatever meaning or utilize whatever information that they have at their disposal at the unconscious level. And then we have unspecified referential index. And so an example of this is, there will be people who have meant a lot to you and who have taught you a great deal. And so here's the thing with this statement here, right? The individual that you're talking to, right, that you're, using this language to, they're the ones that are creating that person, right? Who exactly they are. And once they know who they are, they're going to think about them, right? So you're letting them place in the deletions, the distortions, and the generalizations. Unspecified verbs. This is where you're using language such as you make sense of this in your own way. This allows a person to understand in a way that suits them best, right? Because in their own way, what is that way? Only they know how that way is, right? That particular way that they're going to be able to make the most sense out of this particular situation. So very, very powerful there. Comparison. You feel more and more relaxed. This allows the individual to relax at their own rate that works best for them. Because remember, these are all vague statements. These are all leaving out information that we're using the meta model to gather. And so when you're using this, you're allowing the other person to input that information that is missing there, so that we can place specific information into the unconscious mind. Judgments. It's good or it's great to recall all the times that you were successful. This makes it very easy for that person to, utilize and gather all the different resources that they have, right? All the examples, the experiences of all the times that they were successful. And then we have the distortion. So this is where we're using complex equivalents. And with this example, you can say, as you close your eyes, you become more comfortable. And then the person's going to understand that closing the eyes is the equivalent of becoming more comfortable, right? So as you start to notice how unique and vague these types of statements are, then you're going to easily start to realize all the different scenarios that you can use this language in, and how much it's going to benefit you and everybody else around you. In a previous lecture, we talked about mind reading, and this is the same thing here for being able to use this type of language to help induce more of a trance. So you're easily able to make sense of this as you become more curious about exactly what you're going to learn. Now, this is so powerful here, because you are essentially telling that person, right, that it's going to make sense for them, and that it's easily going to make sense for them, right? And that they're going to become more curious about exactly what they're going to learn. You are essentially giving commands here as to what this person is going to be experiencing, right? And they're placing their own filters in there. So very important to understand that, right? But it's extremely powerful language here when using this in the right context. Nominalization. As you sink deeper into relaxation and your comfort grows, so the ease of your learning can be a source of pure enjoyment. So think about this for a second. What this is doing is it's lacking any specific information, right? So that particular individual can make sense of it in their own way that suits them best. Very, very powerful. Cause and effect. As you breathe deeply and easily, each breath will make you more and more relaxed. So the cause is them breathing deeply, and the effect, right, is going to allow them to be more relaxed. So very powerful here as well. Presuppositions, right? This is where we're assuming something, and this can be easily expressed as, I don't know whether you feel more relaxed before or after you close your eyes. So this presupposes, right, that they're going to close their eyes, right, and that they're going to feel relaxed. So very powerful here. And then finally, we have generalizations. So with the universals, all you know is available to you somewhere in the unconscious. Model operators of necessity. You shouldn't limit yourself if you want to be the best you can be. You must seize the opportunity. Model operators are used to suggest empowering rules for action. Model operators of possibility. You can become more resourceful. You're able to go deeper into your experience. So again, remember the Milton model as being vague, as the language of being able to implant information into that individual's mind or into your own mind, and to help them, gather information that is stuck in the unconscious mind. So help them fill in the own pictures, to help them fill in that missing information so that we can get them more resources that they didn't have at their disposal at a conscious level. So that's going to be it here for this video, and we'll see you on the next one. In this video, we're going to cover using the Milton model. So let's go right ahead and jump into this. So we talked previously about the Milton model and what exactly it is and how it works, how it functions, and how it's a complete opposite of the meta model, and how we use the Milton model to let the other person or ourselves be able to fill in specific data that is deleted, distorted, or generalized. And so now we're going to go into different ways that we can use the Milton model most effectively. So let's go right ahead and jump into this. So there are three phases of the Milton model. Number one is pacing a person's experience and leading them into an altered state of consciousness, okay? Some kind of trance, right? This is where if you're doing hypnosis, or you're just telling people, hey, close your eyes and pretend that you're in a deep trance, right? So if you're working with clients, very important to really understand how to utilize the Milton model effectively, as well as the meta model. But this is where we have the three phases. So the first thing you want to do, as I mentioned, is you want to pace the person's experience and lead them into a hypnotic state. Second thing you want to do is you want to distract the unconscious mind. Okay, and you're doing this by utilizing the very vague language, right? And then number three, you're accessing unconscious resources, letting them fill in the gaps, the missing information through their own resources internally, right? All their experiences, their pictures, all that information that they have deep down stored in the unconscious, you're letting them bring that up so that they can fill in the gaps. So when you're pacing a person's experience, the easiest way to do this is to describe the person's ongoing sensory experience. So essentially what they're hearing, seeing, and feeling. So you describe what has to be there, and you're conveying everything in artfully vague terms, right? This is the art of being vague here, right? Very, very powerful. And with distracting the conscious mind, this is where we're using complex, multi-layered, and ambiguous language to engage the unconscious mind. So one of these is the phonological ambiguity. And this is where you're using different words that sound the same. So you're saying, for example, here with, being here, and also here with hearing words and hearing sounds. Now, I use a lot of this in my sales, in my communication with prospects. So, for example, when I'm on the call and I'm looking to, close the deal up, I'll mention something like, hey, by now, you have enough information based off what you've seen, what you've gone through here, and you're able to see exactly how we can get you X and Y, Z results, right? And so notice there how in the very beginning, I said, by now. And it's completely conversational, and it's very undetected, because what's happening is the BUY is going to the unconscious mind of the prospect, and that's what they're registering. That's what they're thinking. They're thinking BUY, like buying, like purchasing. And so it's almost a hidden command there where I'm telling them to buy now, but in reality, I'm using BY, right? BY now. So very, very powerful there to understand how this command can go into the unconscious mind. And then we have syntactical here, ambiguity. This is where we have a word that is used and the context does not make it clear what the exact function is. So some example statements can be, they were milking cows. Okay, well, in this case, are they the cows that provided the milk, or were they the ones doing the activity, right? Milking the cows. So you can see how vague that is there. And another example here is speaking to you as a child. Okay, well, is the listener a child, or the one who is speaking the actual child, right? So these types of statements can be very vague here, and they are essentially leaving out very specific information and a specific context. And then we have scope ambiguity. This particular pattern here blurs out how much of a sentence is referred to by one of its clauses. So a great example of this is, speaking to you as an intelligent person. Okay, well, who is the intelligent person? Is it me? Is it you? Or is it both of us, right? Notice how they're leaving out key information here. And then we have young men and women. Okay, well, are the men or the women young, or are they both young? Notice here that all of these different type of ambiguity statements and patterns here is really about leaving out key information, right? Deleted, distorted, and we're using this for a specific purpose to get people into different states of trance. Then we have the punctuation ambiguity. These are created by merging two separate sentences into one. And a good example of this is, there are a lot of things, I don't know if you can learn this today, right? Where typically you would have a particular comma there where you would say, there are a lot of things, and I don't know if you can learn this today, right? So it's really about, putting two sentences together and having them not make sense, right? There's missing information there. And then we have double binds. This is where it's giving you a choice, but you only have a predetermined set of options. So whatever you choose is covered. For example, you may want to learn something now or later, or not at all, or it doesn't matter. Now, this can also be the same as like when I'm doing a sales presentation, okay? And I have somebody on the presentation with me, and I'm not asking them if they want to get started, or would they, or maybe, or probably. I'm saying, hey, we have these options here, and you may want one or the other, but I'm curious, which one of these do you feel is going to be the best one for your business? Notice how I'm saying that, which one of these versus me asking them, will you or can you move forward today? I'm not asking, I'm telling them that I'm already assuming that they're going to sign up, and then I'm asking them which one of these do they want to go with. Very, very powerful, right? So we understand what the Milton model does, right? And it's really about accessing unconscious resources. It's really designed to help somebody get more choices, because oftentimes we feel very limited, or we feel that there's no other choice, there's no other solution. We're just stuck with how we're feeling, what we're thinking, and there's no way out. Well, there's a ton of other resources out there. And remember, one of the presuppositions with NLP is that we all have all the resources that we need already within us. So let's go over some of these examples here. So we have the conversational postulates. So this is a form of question that suggests a yes or no answer on the surface, okay, but which can be understood as a command on a deeper level. It avoids giving that direct instruction and gives a choice of response. For example, can you imagine that? Do you know how to relax? I always love to use phrases such as, can you imagine this? Or can you imagine that? Or imagine how your life is going to be when X and Y, Z happens, right? I like to use this type of language when I'm on sales calls, because I get to essentially help them paint a picture, right, of how their ideal life is going to look by using these types of statements and allowing them to fill the pictures with what they want to see and what their ideal outcome and scenario is going to be. So extremely powerful here. Next, we have tag questions. So A tag question is one that is added at the end of a statement in a way that suggests agreement. Now, we talked about this in one of the other lectures about the yes set, and this is essentially what this is. So when you're asking questions that you already know the answer to, or that you know that is going to get a yes. And some easy examples here are, you can relax, can't you? That was easy, wasn't it? If I could show you a way to increase your revenue and reduce your costs, would you be interested in learning more? Yes. So you want to be able to get them to say yes, 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 at least 3 times, because it puts them into a light trance. And then we have embedded questions. So these are indirect questions that may arise in the flow of a conversation. So the other person is responding internally as if the questions had been asked directly. And a good example of this is, I wonder if you know what is bothering you. So let's dissect this question here. So first thing is that we're presupposing, right? We're assuming that something is bothering them. And then you have the statement here of, you know. So you're essentially getting them to go into their resources and pull out information, right, that they know is actually, bothering them. Next, we have embedded commands. Now, these are one of the most powerful that you can use in language and communication. And some examples of these are, I don't know whether you'll go into a trance in a few moments, or let yourself be comfortable, or people learn very easily, how to relax and access unconscious resources. Now, notice here the words that are bolded, that I'm really emphasizing them, okay? Because that is what you want to get embedded into the unconscious. You really want to emphasize that. So once again here, listen to how I'm saying this. Let yourself be comfortable. People learn very easily how to relax and access unconscious resources. Notice the emphasis that I'm putting on those words. It's important for you to do that so that that can be an embedded command. Very powerful. Next, we have quotes. This pattern offers a suggestion or idea as if it's coming from someone else, and so you then have no responsibility for it. And a good example of this is Milton Erickson used to say that everyone can go into a trance, right? Notice how powerful that is there, where you're just, assuming something to be true because somebody else said it. And so you're not taking that responsibility for that statement. So-and-so said it, so it's got to be true. So don't blame me, right? Very, very powerful. And then finally, we have metaphors. Metaphors are extremely powerful as well. Any kind of stories, analogies, right? That really get us to see and understand real complex structure. So a really good example of this is the elephant in the room, which means, hey, there's a problem here and we need to, really iron it out. Or there's plenty of fish in the sea, right? That tells us that, there's a ton of people out there for us if we haven't quite yet found our right partner. So very, very powerful here with using the Milton model. I definitely recommend you check this out maybe a couple times to get familiar with the type of language, embedded questions, commands, quotes, right? Different things that you can use so that you can become more effective in the usage of the Milton model. So that's going to be it here for this video, and we'll see you on the next one.